learning goal number 3, where we will be comparing fractions with common and uncommon denominators. So last time you added and subtracted them, now we're just going to compare them and see which ones are bigger and which ones are smaller. So make sure you write this in your math journal on a nice new page, and we will go ahead and get started. So we are going to be talking about comparing different fractions. Sometimes they have common numerators, sometimes they have common denominators, sometimes they have nothing in common. So one tip that will help you is to look at the fraction bar. So if you've got one, that's a really good trick. So our first one, which one would be greater, 1/2 or 1/3? So in this case, if you look at the fraction bar, 1/2 and 1/3, it's pretty easy to see that 1/2 is bigger. So when we write a comparison, we'll use the greater than, less than, equal symbols. So in this case, 1/2 is greater than 1/3. So our little greater gator eats a bigger number, or 1/3 is less than 1/2. Either of those would work. So that's just a really quick, simple, get your feet wet kind of fraction comparison. And then we'll move into some of the harder stuff.
Well, somewhat harder. Let's see here. So first of all, we just want to make sure that you remember that term unit fractions. That's basically just a fraction with 1 as the numerator. And they become smaller as the denominator gets bigger. Now you might be thinking, what in the world does that mean? But we'll have you look at these as examples to help you understand exactly what we mean by that. So think of this yummy cookie, and who doesn't like chocolate chip cookies, right?
That looks good.
Yeah. If you like them, and of course who doesn't, would you rather have 1/3 of the cookie or 1/6 of the cookie? So first of all, you want to think about the numerator as the number of pieces. In this case, we're looking at 2 unit fractions. We're looking at 1/3 and 1/6. So they have the same numerator. So you're thinking there's 1. Hi, Shadow.
Sorry.
And then if you think of the denominator, that's the division. So you're thinking that you have 1 piece, either out of 3 divisions, or 1 piece out of 6 divisions. Now you should really know for sure, probably. So 1/3, just looking there, that's exactly what it means, and 1/6 too. That's just another way of thinking about it in words. So if you really like cookies, you would have decided by now 1/3 or 1/6. I think Shadow's trying to tell us 1/3.
Shadow wants one whole. One whole cookie.
So 1/3 of the cookie is greater than 1/6. And if once again, there's just a little visual here to help you out as well.
I guess we've got a guest teacher today, huh? All right. So now, get down. Which fraction is greater? Now we're going to give you a couple of rules to help you remember, and you are going to have to write these down. There's only 2. And it's going to look like a lot, but it's really only like 1 or 2 sentences. So the first rule that you need to write down is when you compare fractions with like denominators, so common denominators, the parts are all the same size. Okay? Therefore, a fraction with a greater top number will be greater because it has more parts. Okay? And we'll give you an example of this because, again, that's really wordy and it's easier, I think, to see the numbers. So
definitely
write it down so you've got it, and then write this example down too. That way you've got that as well. So pause this because I'm sure that's a lot of writing. You're probably not caught up yet. So in this case, the denominator is the same, like we just said with the rule. So both of the denominators are 50. So we're talking about something that's split into 50 equal parts. So would you rather have 40 or 45 of those? So that's where it says in the second part of the rule, the fraction with the greater top number, the numerator, will be greater because you'll have more parts. So 45/50ths is actually greater than 40/50ths. So that's all that those words are saying. Okay? And then another example, 2/25ths or 4/25ths, which is bigger? So think about that. Try it out, and hopefully y'all got 4/25ths. Rule number 2.
All right. So second rule to write down, and once again, I know it seems like a lot of writing, but I think this is it really for notes. So this one is now focusing on the numerators. When you have common numerators, or they're the same, the fraction with the smaller denominator is actually the greater fraction. And once again, we'll sort of look at some examples to help you understand why that's true. But pause for a moment, jot that down, and then we can take a peek at these fractions. So our first example, we have 1 over 50 or 1 over 60. And so like we were saying, the numerator is the same. It's just whatever denominator is smaller, that actually has the greater fraction. So you should have 1 over 50th. 1 over 50 is greater than in this case.
Right, like a pizza. If you had a pizza split into 50 pieces and a pizza split into 60 pieces, one of the 50 pieces would be bigger than one piece of the 60.
Yes. So in this case too, we have 1 over 99 or 1 over 100. It's not a big difference, but because the denominator is smaller, 1 over 99 is the greater fraction.
Yep. And now a couple little tricks. If you don't have a common numerator or a common denominator, then it gets a little bit more difficult. So here are a few things that you could try. The first one is actually, such a baby, is getting a common denominator. So think about 2/4 and 3/5. So 2/4 here, if we want to get a common denominator with 3/5, we're going to end up multiplying the numerator and denominator to get to 20, because we multiply it by 5. If you look at our denominator here, we're going to end up multiplying essentially these two by that denominator. So if we multiply 4 by 5, you get 20. If you multiply 2 by 5, you get 10. So 2/4 and 10/20 are equivalent. And if we look at 3/5 here, we're going to multiply by the 4. So both of them. So now looking at them, 10/20 or 12/20, which is bigger, it's easy to see 12/20. Now again, the original question is which is bigger, 2/4 or 3/5. So 3/5 is equivalent to this. So 3/5 is actually the greater number. And then one more trick.
Oh yes, we're gonna think of a strategy called thinking of benchmarks. And if you're wondering what a benchmark is, it's just where you can think to yourself, okay, I know what 0 means, and I know what a half means, and I know what 1 means. And if you think of those benchmarks when you're looking at these fractions, that might help you too when you're trying to put them in order or compare the two. So which is greater? We have 2/4. A lot of you might realize that 1 half equals 2/4 right off the bat. And if that's the case, you can think to yourself, yeah, that's a half right there. Then with 5/6, a lot of times I think, well, if I have 5 out of 6 pieces, that's close to 1.
Yeah.
It's really close to 1.
Very close.
So now we can easily see that 5/6 is definitely greater than 2/4.
All right, now there are 3 for you to try on your own, and then pause it, and we will come back and explain them to you, and then you'll have a few to do on your own that we will then go over when we come back to class. So go ahead and pause this, and then we'll go through all 3 of these, but try it first so you can see if you've got them right or not. All right, so for number 1, I'm looking at 2/3 and 3/8. Well, if I think about it, 2/3, if I have 2/3 of something, that's pretty close to a whole, right? It's almost 3/3. And 3/8, well, I know 4/8 is a half, and this is less than that. So 2/3 is close to 1, 3/8 is less than a half, so I know automatically 2/3 is bigger without even having to go through the finding a common denominator. I was sort of using the benchmark way. And then number 2, again, the same thing, 1/4 and 9/10. Well, 9/10 of something is really close to a whole, and 1/4 is closer to 0 than it is to 1 whole. So without even really doing anything but thinking about it logically, I can figure out that 9/10 is bigger. Now, number 3, this one's you, but this one's not quite as easy.
Right. And so instead of trying the benchmark strategy, let's just look at it by thinking of the common denominator strategy. So we have 2/5, and if we multiply by 8, the other denominator, we're going to get 16 over 40. And so for 5/8, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to look at the other denominator and multiply that. So 5 times 5 equals 25. 8 times 5 equals 40. So now at least we have this common denominator, and then I can easily see that 5 over 40, or 5/8,
Mhm.
is going to be greater than 16 over 40, or 2/5.
Yep. All right, and the last part now is, I believe there are 6 problems for you to do on your own, and there's a variety of them. Some of them have common numerators already, some of them have common denominators, some of them don't have anything in common. So you need to write the problems down. You got to make sure you write down both fractions and then sort of fill in that empty space with a greater than, less than, or equal to sign.
And please number them. Just makes it easier when we discuss in groups. So.
That would make it so much easier. And that's it. So we'll see you tomorrow.